introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste. I've been around for a long, long year. Stole many a man's soul and faith. I was around when Jesus Christ had his moment of doubt and pain. Make damn sure that Pilate washed his hands to seal his fate. Pleased to meet you, hope you guess my name. But what's puzzling you is the nature of my game. I stuck around St. Petersburg when I saw it was a time for a change. I killed the Tsar and his ministers. Anastasia screamed in vain. I rode a tank and the generals rank when the blitzkrieg reigned and the bodies stank. Pleased to meet you, hope you guess my name. But what's puzzling you is the nature of my game. I watch with glee while your kings and queens fought for 10 decades for the gods they made. I shouted out, who killed the Kennedys? When after all, it was you and me. But let me please introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste. I play trap for troubadours who get killed before they reach Bombay. Pleased to meet you, hope you guess my name.
Hey guys.
Oh, what's puzzling you is the nature of my game.
3D Bronze, Anagram, Sasha and Jason Dent. 3D Bronze, JK Pioneer, Uli. Good to see you on your Off Trail Jaeger. Good to see you. Joe Sheeran, good to see you. Anon, haven't seen you in a while. Christy, K Pro, good to see you in. Yes, my intro, I love this song. I cannot play the Rolling Stones version, of course. Pleased to meet all of you. You all know my name. I am a happy camper, even though we're all supposed to be shelter in place. I'd rather be happy out in the woods somewhere. Anon, where have you been? Haven't seen you posting anywhere in a while.
So if you meet me, have some courtesy.
220 face shields, awesome. Dan? That's good. And my wife works in the hospital, so we appreciate you doing that for all those other medical workers out there.
Pleased to meet you.
Pleased to meet you all.
Hope you guess my name.
I love this song. I can't stop it. What is the nature of my game? Zaro, how are you? Let me stop this. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Flip Side, your non-PC beer drinking, thrill the chase talking show. And you guys know I like to drink beer. So tonight I'm drinking a Happy Camper IPA from the Santa Fe Brewery in Santa Fe, New Mexico, my home state here where I live. So I'm going to pop the top on this, pour it out. I know it's late where some of you are, and it's earlier where some of you are, but it's 10 o'clock here, or not 10 o'clock, it's 9:24. Usually I go live at 10, but anyway. So I'm going to say cheers to all of you night owls out there enjoying a night of Fennsomnia. Cheers. So again, the wife is working this evening. I have both the kids here at home, and they are both sound asleep right now. But of course, you all know at any time they can wake up and come out here and become very entertaining. Some of you all I've seen in the past. Guys, I've got all my notes here and stuff tonight, but I really did not have a very particular topic that I wanted to discuss. I was just kind of, as I was doing some things around the house tonight, I was listening here. This is my COVID-19 hairdo. It's actually, I'm highlighting my hair in gray because the more it grows out, the grayer it is getting on the tip. So I just tell everybody I'm highlighting the tips gray. Nobody knows the differences, right? Anyway, again, the kids are in bed, but they could wake up at any time and come in here, and you guys know how entertaining that could be. And the wife is at the hospital working tonight, so I thought I was listening to AGK tonight, and I was going to actually try and call in and talk to Shelly and Toby, but they kind of shut down a little earlier than I expected them to. So I said, well, I was talking to Jason and Sasha a little bit, and I said, you know what, let's just do a impromptu Fennsomnia tonight, and let's just chat it up with you guys and just have an open discussion and say hi to everybody and just talk, because I know all of you guys are kind of stir crazy, probably wanting to get out to your search areas and go searching, but unfortunately we can't. You know, a lot of the search states right now, if you try and go in there, you could actually be fined and ticketed by that local authority because you're not indigenous to that state or that county. So, you know, you just can't do it unless you live in that search state and go out and search. So it's unfortunate, unfortunately, for a lot of you guys. Some of you I've talked on my Facebook channel and stuff that just because you don't live in one of the search states, you can't go out. So it's unfortunate. So right now is the time to just, you know, have a good time and chat with everybody. And there's been some great channels out there, you know. I really enjoy, I've come on a couple times and talked with K-Pro and Candy over on her channel. And I like talking with Carter and his channel over there at the House Husband Diaries. I like, you know, the guy, Michael Elder with the Treasures Galore. You know, Smell the Sunshine is doing a great job. There's a lot of great new FinTubers out there that are putting great content out there. So just like all of you, I'm fans of them too. I enjoy listening and watching their channels right now because we can't get out there, and I'm right there with you guys, just kind of enjoying and listening to them. So I thought I'd jump in here and say hi to you guys and give you all a cheers. So what do you guys want to talk about tonight? You know, I've really been on this personally, this whole kick of, you know, the order of the clues. You know, is there, you know, I was on K-Pro's channel the other day, and she'll admit it in here, and talking with her and Cynthia and Carter and Candy, who I like to call Caramel now, apparently, about this whole, you know, discussion about consecutive, chronological, and contiguous of the clues in the poem. And one thing I've really brought up is I don't think Forrest has really said that the clues in the poem are contiguous. There's only been one time, and you guys fact check me, please, because you know, as much as people say I know all these quotes by heart or whatever, I'm not the authority on any of these things, and I'm just as, you know, capable of making mistakes as any one of us. But I think the only time he's ever said contiguous has been in the what was it, the Moby Dickens 2013 interview, you know, our interview or video, whatever you want to call it, where he, you know, he's asked a certain specific question and he said they're contiguous. And a lot of people assume that he's talking about the clues in the poem are actually contiguous. And me, I would love for him to say that the, you know, the clues in the poem are contiguous, because that means that they're bordering, they're touching, that they're connected, just like the lower 48 states in the United States are contiguous. They're bordering, they're touching. But Hawaii and Alaska are not bordering and touching because they're obviously in different locations. Because then that would mean that individual words or individual singular phrases in the poem would not be the clues, because then they're not touching each other. But if they're touching each other, then that would just give me more confirmation bias or confidence or whatever to believe that the 9 sentences would be the 9 clues. But when he was asked that question in that interview, he was the person that asked that question had asked, did you have the 9 clues before you hid the treasure, or did the 9 clues come after? And then he said they're contiguous. And I think that he was talking about the idea of the 9 clues, you know, him having the 9 clues before he hid the treasure or after were contiguous. That whole idea, not necessarily the clues. Now, that's just my interpretation. I'm not saying that's, you know, the fact. It's just a flip side of it. You know, most people think that he's saying that the 9 clues in the poem are actually contiguous. And trust me, I would love that, because then I would think it would be more, you know, confidence builder for me and my theories. But I just don't think that's what he's saying. And I talked a little about with K-Pro a little bit about that in there. But just saying hi to some more people in here. CMC, how are you? Yes, the Flipster, good to see you. Adventures in Dirt, hey, good to see you in there. Zozo Rocks, Davio, the flip side, Davio. Davio's in here, where are you, Davio? Sassafras CMT, good to see you in here. Jack, how are you? Debbie Teal, hi, Sean. Yes, hi to you too, Debbie. K-Pro says in here real quick, Flip, does contiguous, well, it just jumped up on me. Does contiguous mean in close proximity, in your opinion? Contiguous meaning bordered. Okay, if we're talking out of the context of what we think Forrest means, if I can say this right, I've had a couple of whiskeys and now I'm on a beer, so let me just tell you where I'm at here. Close proximity, in your opinion. If we're taking it in just our interpretation, Christy, as in contiguous, and not Forrest Fenn, what you think him saying the 9 clues are contiguous, because I don't think he meant to say that the 9 clues are contiguous. I think he said very directly and definitively the 9 clues are, you know, consecutive as we view them in the poem, not contiguous or continuous or sequential. He said that they are consecutive in the poem. But contiguous, do I think that the 9 clues are touching each other? I think that the 9 clues, I think we like to believe that there's like this step-by-step process of the 9 clues, that we start here and we go here, 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 all the way to the end where the treasure chest is. In my belief, and this goes back to the video I did about, you know, is the poem a map to the treasure, that we got to have a starting point. We got to know where we start, Christy, and then we've got to know where we end, kind of like that X on the map, you know, like a pirate treasure map, that X on a map, or what most of us think is the blaze, and then we look quickly down and, you know, magically there's the treasure, right? So I look at it as really just 2 points, a start and an end. And I think most people think that there's 9 geographical locations. Now, I'm not saying that that's, you know, not right. I'm just thinking of a start point and an end point. And as the poem says, you know, from there, it's no place for the meek. So I think everything prior to, or those words in the poem prior to, from there, may actually give us that starting point. But I mean, a lot of people want to think that, you know, begin it where warm waters halt is solely the first clue and is the exact precise starting point. I personally don't see it that way, Christy. I know some people do, and they may be right and I may be wrong, that they may think that, you know, you got to start where, you know, begin it where warm waters halt, whatever you think that point is. And there's many of those places in the Rocky Mountains, according to Forrest Fenn. But whatever you think that point is, and then from there, we take it in the canyon down, not far, but too far to walk. And then we put in below the Homer Brown. You guys see that as a step-by-step way. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I just see it a little bit differently. I think he may be describing the correct starting point. And then from there, we proceed. So you've got your starting point, and then from there, we try and find the ending point. I see it as two different points, not 9 separate geological, positions on a map. It's just the flip side of it. I'm not saying it's correct, not saying you're wrong or anybody else. I just see it a little bit differently. So I don't necessarily see them. I think it's all talking about the same area. So yes, in some ways they're contiguous, Christy, but they may not be 9 individual separate points. If that makes sense to you, and it may not may not make any sense to you. And Christy, you got to make sure you put in the flip side in there, because I just got lucky and saw that. Where else are we at? But I'm really, in this off season, so to speak, even though I've had a few searches prior to this whole lockdown come in, has really been me focused on this whole idea that if Forrest Fenn has said in the lure interview that he doesn't think anybody has given him the 9 clues in the right order, or given him, he didn't say 9 clues, given him the clues in the right order, that it kind of stands out to me like, okay, wait a minute. He said the 9 clues are consecutive, or in consecutive order in that Lorena Mills May 13th, 2011 interview, that he says are in consecutive order. And then he says the first clue is this. And if we are to believe that the Voice of America interview, that the 9th clue or the final clue, you look down because there's the treasure, and then you read the poem and it says, if you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down. Well, that makes you think that's the last clue. But there sure is a heck of a lot of more information in the poem, outside of those words between begin and cease. So are we just supposed to ignore that? Is that not information that's supposed to be important? I don't think so. So again, if no one's given him the clues in the right order, are those clues not in the same order as we view them in the poem versus as we're supposed to follow them once we decipher them? If that can make sense to you. It's just this whole thought process I've been going through for quite a while here. Hey, Sasha, what are you saying? Do you think clues equal nouns? Cheers. I think that the nouns are very important. I think that we can't ignore them, like Forrest Fenn has said. I think that nouns are supposed to be what? There we go, elementary English here, right? A person, place, or thing, right? I think that they are very important, because if we were trying to find a location, one of those important things as part of a noun is a place, right? A person, place, or thing. And I think nouns are very important. And if we simply believe, as some do, that the 9 clues only exist between begin and cease, there's like, outside of those stanzas 2, 3, and 4, there's like, I think upwards of like 14 nouns outside of it that are contained within 1, 5, and 6. So are we supposed to ignore those nouns, Sasha? I don't think so. And if we go, and this is something I brought up here recently, if we go to it's the Jennifer London interview with Forrest Fenn. This goes back to, I think, like 2013 or so. And Jennifer London, around I think it's a 10-minute and 45-second mark, she asked him, and she's talking about the 9 clues. She said, Forrest Fenn, there's references to water. There's references to the House of Brown. And then she said, who's Brown? And then Forrest Fenn said, there's references to wood. And then Jennifer says, well, you didn't answer my question. Who's Brown? And then Forrest Fenn responds, well, if I told you that, you go right straight to the treasure. What I find interesting in that is that she's talking about the 9 clues, she being Jennifer. She's talking about the 9 clues. She says there's references to water. There's references to the House of Brown. And then Forrest Fenn interjects and says there's references to wood. So is wood not important? When he says, if you are brave and in the wood, is that not important? Wood is a noun, So If you think the 9 clues only exist between begin and cease, would is completely out of that whole, what you think is the 9 clues. But Forrest Fenn is saying there's references to would. Is that not important? And I personally think it is. Now, again, my interpretation of Forrest Fenn's words are not confirmation of his intent. I'm just interpreting that. But I think a lot of people will, because they think those 9 clues only exist in there, and because they think they're just consecutive, and they only exist between begin and cease, that those things outside of those are not clues, that they may only be hints. And I'm not saying people are ignoring those words that fall outside of those things. I just don't think that they see them as clues or things that are going to help them get closer to the treasure. But I think most of you guys that are in the chat room tonight, the 60 some odd of you that are in here now, are obviously dedicated searchers. I don't think any of you guys are ignoring any of the words in the poem. I just think that it's important that we, and this is just my personal interpretation, I think it's important that we identify what those 9 clues are. And I think it must be a very definitive number. Otherwise, Forrest Fenn never would have given us the number of clues. Otherwise, he just would have said, I left you guys a poem with clues that will lead you to the end of my rainbow and the treasure. You know, and then we never would have had this debate about what the 9 clues are. We never would have had this debate about the sentences are the clues or anything else. We just would have been focused on the poem in its entirety. So I think there's something to that. There's something important in that. And to me, the only definitive thing that we can point to, definitive number of things that we can point to in that poem, is the sentences. And that may just, some think it's just a coincidence. Okay, maybe it is just a coincidence, but it's one hell of a coincidence in my opinion. Sasha, I know I went on a complete ramble there, guys, but I definitely think that the nouns are extremely important in the poem. And there's several words in the poem that some, let's take the word hint, for example. Hint can be considered a noun or a verb, but words like riches can only be considered a noun. There's certain words in that poem that can only be considered one thing. Let's take meek. He says it's no place for the meek. Meek is actually an adjective. It's not even a noun. But when you put the definitive article the before that adjective, it makes that adjective then become a noun, because it's then speaking about all those that are timid or obedient or those types of things. But we have to understand that this poem is written from the perspective of the architect of the poem, that being Forrest Fenn. So it is his perspective that the area that he's talking about, no place for the meek, is a place that is those that are meek to him, not necessarily you and I. It's no different than not far, but too far to walk. Is coming from the perspective of the architect of the poem, that being Forrest Fenn, that the distance, you know, from whatever you believe Warm Waters Halt is to the put in below the home of Brown is too far to walk for Forrest Fenn. So does that not tell us, at least in my opinion, that he didn't actually physically start at whatever your idea of what Warm Waters Halt is? That's not where he started. He started somewhere else, because for him, the distance from Warm Waters Halt to the next, if you want to call it, geographical location was too far to walk. He didn't start there. He started somewhere else. So is our starting point at what Warm Waters Halt is, or is it somewhere else? We've got to take it from the perspective of the man who's writing this poem, just like the meek. You know, meek to me may be something completely than what you interpreted as and what Forrest Fenn interpreted it as. It's all from the perspective of that person who is subjective. Not a human being, we're all subjective. And I'm rambling on, geez, I know I am. Holy cow. Get a couple beers, and I'll ramble on. Cheers. All right, I see one here from Zozo. What's he saying? Zozo Rocks. Flip side, are you still a 9 clues, 9? Yeah. 9 sentences, 9 clues. Zozo, it's a theory, and I can't prove it. And I'm always open to different interpretations because I can't prove that theory. There's been no definitive proof, Zozo, that those are accurate. And honestly, everything has kind of been contrary to that. And I agree with all those people that are like, well, Forrest Fenn says, you know, stanza 2 sounds like 3 or 4 clues to him, or the first clue is this. There's been a multitude of things out there in the Fennosphere that have been kind of against that theory. And I'm completely in agreement with those people that point those things out. But again, I try, you know, and remain as objective as I can. And I try and interpret those words from Forrest and try and make sense of it all. You know, I was having a discussion today with Goldie over on Mysterious Writings about this. And I pointed out, and let's see if I can put this into words as best as I can, as that when in that audio interview, and this is from, what year was it from? Oh God, now K-Pro is going to point me out on this. I can't remember what year it was from, but it was from CBC As It Happens. And there's an audio interview where in there, the interviewer reads the second stanza. And you guys got to do your own research on this. Go and find this and listen to it for yourself. But she reads the second stanza, and she reads it like we would view it in the poem. You know, begin it where warm waters halt, and take it in the canyon down. Not far, but too far to walk. Put in below the home of brown. Now, when you read that, when you read it in the poetic format, not as a line, but as a verse, the poetic format of verses makes you pause between each individual verse. And when you read it that way, it can sound like it is 4 different trains of thought. Begin it where warm waters halt, 1 train of thought, and take it in the canyon down, a 2nd train of thought. Not far, but too far to walk, a 3rd train of thought, and then put in below the home of brown, the 4th train of thought. Now, when you read it in a poetic format with each verse and the pauses in between, it can sound like 3 or 4 clues if you are trying to find out and identify what the clues are. And it's funny when you listen to that and the way she reads it, and then Forrest Fenn says, sounds like 3 or 4 clues to me, and he kind of laughs about it. It is because it sounds like. Now, that is not him definitively saying that stanza 2 is 3 or 4 clues. Some people would interpret that as being a definitive statement from Forrest stating that stanza 2 contains 3 or 4 clues. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying I have the flip side of this, and I just don't interpret it that way. Now, if you were to read that stanza in normal prose, which is in the strict English grammatical way of reading it, without the breaks that the verses in the poem give you, it reads in a completely different way. And where the pauses that the commas give you, yes, K-Pro, I know punctuation isn't important according to you, but it is important to me, makes a completely different meaning. Begin it where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down. Not far, but too far to walk. Put in below the home of brown. There's 2 different ways that sounds, whether it's in the poetic format or it's in the prose format. There's just different ways, guys. And when you read it in the poetic format, sure, it sounds like, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is. I'm just trying to get you guys to think in a different way. So yes, Zozo, I'm still a 9 clues, 9 senses guy. And there's no, you know, dating site for that, buddy, right? What else we got? Did I skip way ahead? Probably did. Hey, Rodney, good to see you in here, buddy. How have you been? Did you get a promotion yet? I know last thing I know you were Sergeant First Class. Are you the new First Sergeant? Come on. Where are you at, buddy? How are you doing? Have you deployed? Are you somewhere new? What's going on with you? I haven't seen you in a while. Alan K, how are you? And I'm trying to go back up here and find what the, again, guys, I did not have a real topic for tonight. I'm just kind of really talking to you guys. See something from Hooli there. Brian Gates, good to see you. Michael, MEH, good to see you in here. Bud, One Wiser, Ninning, good to see you in here. Brian Gates. I'm just going back up through here. Jack, looks like you've got a question trying to find it. Gay Delkin, Eugene, how are you? Kurt, good to see you in there. Kurt and I had a, guys, if you're not part of the Flipside Facebook group, that's fine if you're not. We've got like 24 people in there. But Kurt and I had a really good back and forth discussion the other day that I thought was really good. So Kurt, good to see you in here talking to you in here. JP on here, the stands 156. So I'm just trying to catch up with a little bit, you guys here. Give me a second to go back up here and make sure. So that was Zozo. I know I go on 10. JK Pioneer says Flipside stands 156, the hints that are in the book. Sure, there's a lot of people think that, you know, the hints in the book, as Forrest Fenn says, you know, there are also other subtle clues in the book or scattered in the stories. So yeah, I mean, I'm not denying that Forrest Fenn has said that there is subtle hints or clues that are scattered, you know, in the stories that'll help you with the clues, but we just don't know how they help. That's the whole thing. We just don't know, do they help us identify the correct Homo Brown? Do they, you know, correct us or help us to identify the correct Where Warm Waters Halt? We just don't know what they do. Do they help us with identifying what the clues are or what certain words? And we just don't know. And that's, you know, why I've been so adamant about sticking with just the 166 words in the poem. Again, guys, yes, I pay attention to everything outside of that, but I know that those things are not, you know, the foundation of my solve, and that those things could just lead me in a myriad of rabbit holes outside. I have fun going down them with you guys, but I have to always pull myself back and check myself and go, okay, you know, I'm going to go way off the deep end here if I don't get back to the poem. So yeah, JK Pioneer, yeah. 1, 5, and 6 could be alluding to hints. They could be hints. I mean, again, I don't care if you think that the 9 clues, there's 9 clues in the poem and, you know, 101 hints in the poem. It really doesn't matter if you can understand the poem in its entirety and circumstance your way to the treasure. It really won't matter. And in the end of this, when somebody finds it and they say, hey, I threw a jar of peanut butter against the wall and it told me the correct state, who are we to question that finder? You know, we can't. Kurt, I believe the last clue is in the last stanza. Sure. But I really like what, Kurt, I really like what Forrest Fenn says in the VOA, number 3, where he says, you know, when you get to the last clue, look down because you're where the treasure chest is. Now, a lot of people incorporate that to say that, oh man, that automatically assumes that, you know, if you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down. You know, your quest to cease. Well, I think of it like, if you really believe that you have the correct solve and you have arrived within several steps of where the treasure chest is, what the fuck else are you going to do? You're going to look down. You're going to, I mean, unless you think the treasure chest is up on a tree somewhere, Iron Will, I know you think that, but unless you think it's up on a tree, you're going to kick over every rock, log, you know, pine needle that's in your area trying to find the treasure, right? You're going to look down. You're going to scan the area. You're going to scrutinize everything that's there, trying to find something that, quote unquote, stands out to you, right? You're going to do that. So whether you think that, you know, that is in the last stanza, Kurt, so what does he say? Oh, here we go now. The last stanza. It's so hard. You read everything consecutively when you try and figure it out from the last one. It says, so hear me all and listen good. Your effort will be worth the cold. If you are brave and in the wood, I give you title to the gold. I read that information as it's 2 separate clues. So hear me all and listen good. Your effort will be worth the cold. That's a period. It ends it there. If you are brave and in the wood, I give you title to the gold. I see that as 2 separate clues. And I see those as 2 clues that may fall in between if you are wise and found the blaze. I think in order to be wise and found the blaze, you've got to understand the poem in its entirety. So I think that clue, which may be theoretically the last clue, if you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down, your quest has ceased. But Terry Scant, get the hell out of there and, go in peace, enjoy the treasure chest and do well in the rest of your life, may be the last clue. But I think that the information to understand if you are brave and in the wood and your effort will be worth the cold may come before you being wise. You got to understand that information in order to be wise and arrive, at understanding what the blaze is and where the blaze is and everything else. So I think, again, there's this off season, I've gone so deep into trying to understand the order of the clues. And is there really an order of the clues that is not in the same order that we view them in the poem? And that's different if you think that they're the 9 clues of the 9 senses, or if you think they only exist between begin and cease. I think there's a difference in that order, personally. Not to say that it's right. It's just a different thought process I'm going through and going down this rabbit hole with all you guys. So I'm going down a little bit more. That was Kurt. Kay Delkin, Eugene, how are you? I knew what question to ask Forrest at the lure. He had to answer it. Gay Delkin, Eugene, I don't know what question you asked him. I wasn't there. I wish I could have been. It was not good timing for me. I couldn't make it to that. Cheers, guys. So I don't know what exact question you asked him in there. If you want to tell me what that was later in here, I'll hit it back up and we'll talk about it. Jack, at the flip side, the meek shall inherit the earth. Noun. Yeah, I mean, Jack, the meek, again, meek is an adjective. It's describing, a certain person or thing, right? But when you put the definitive article before that adjective, it turns meek into a noun. It's talking about a group of individuals that are meek. But that group of individuals that are meek is subjective based on the speaker or the writer. Because those that are meek to me based on my life experiences might be different than those people that are meek based on Forrest Fenn's life experiences. I mean, if you're a Delta Force, operator, or you're an airborne ranger, or if you're a Force Recon Marine, those people that are meek are completely different than, a civilian person who thinks people are meek, right? It's all subjective. It's different. But so we're talking about those people that are meek based on the interpretation of the architect of the poem. But we're talking about Forrest Fenn, a man who spent his life, doing fascinating things, right? So we have to take it from that perspective, from his perspective. So it's not something that we can really pinpoint down. But to him, we're talking about a man, Forrest Fenn, who admittedly has spent a good portion of his life in the Rocky Mountains and exploring and on the ground, flying over and doing all these things that this place that he's talking about is a place that is no place for the meek, those people that he thinks that are meek. So it's got to be a place that he's accustomed to, that he's normally gone through, passed through, whatever you want to think. So again, it's not definitive. We cannot pinpoint that place and say, oh, this is it. Now, and I may be completely wrong. Some people look at that and say, oh, well, it's a place that is associated with the word meek, and that may be a geographical place that you could say, oh, it's this point because it says sheep eaters. Well, that's no place for the meek, right? I mean, I don't know. I just think we have to look at it from the perspective of there, and I think it's something that we can definitively say is a location. I may be completely wrong, Jack, and that's okay. Many people think I am, and I can be. I don't have the treasure. I don't know. I'm just going down, keep going through here. Good to see you guys talking away in here. Hooley says, at the flip side, did Forrest ever say that there are only 9 clues in the poem? No, he's never said there are only 9 clues. He just said, so I wrote a poem containing 9 clues that, if followed precisely, will lead to the end of my rainbow and the treasure. So he's never said there's only 9 clues. We just, based on his words, we have to go on what he says, Huli, that there are 9 clues. There could be 9 clues and, like I said before, 101 hints in there. We don't know. But I think he did say something that the final clue would be, well, he said this to Douglas Preston, and Douglas Preston said a couple different ways, that the final clue would be where he parked his car, right? At this place or that place. But I think the key point in that is where he parked his car. If Forrest Fenn was going to do this by himself and he had nobody else to help him, because 2 people can keep a secret if one of them was dead, then would it not be a really important clue where he parked his car, right? Because where he parked his car would be pretty close proximity to where he hid the treasure, or where he interned himself with the treasure, right? So that was a kind of a thing that he couldn't get around. If he couldn't trust anybody to help him out with this, because 2 people can keep a secret if one of them is dead, and he's theoretically, we all know, is still alive, and he couldn't trust anybody to do this. So he couldn't go and turn himself with the treasure, because where he parked his car, or a rented car, or his personal car, would be a dead giveaway to the geographical region where he interned himself, thus the treasure. Wouldn't want to do that now, would we? Going back down, Rodney. Whoa, look over here. It's flip side, Rodney. Good to see you. Alan K, good to see you. Debbie Teal at the flip side, in stanza 2 could be 2 clues since it refers to 2 places. 2 places, okay. Where warm waters halt, you could look at that as 1 place and put in below the Homer Brown as 2 places, right? You could. I see it as 2 separate sentences. So I see it as 2 separate clues. So I see that as potentially, I don't know if 2 separate places, but possibly. I'm not going to get into too much of my interpretation of that. But yeah, I see where you're going with that, Debbie. Again, I go back, Debbie, I personally go back to something I recently came up with, and this is, I've got to give props to, I want to say again, it was Loco Lobo and somebody else over on Dale Neitzel's this last year that pointed out this whole Columbia audio podcast that came out in 2016, where Forrest Fenn says, or he's asked to read a little bit of the poem, and Forrest Fenn responds, well, hey, I'll read the first few lines, but he goes on to read the entire first 2 stanzas. And then he says, that's the first few clues. And that just makes me think, oh, okay, well, wait a minute. If that's the first few clues, it just so happens that it's 3 sentences, and that's the first few lines. So it just kind of, when I think of a line in the poem, okay, and I'm not into poetry, okay, but when I think of a line in the poem, I think of, as I have gone alone in there. I think of that as a single line. I think of begin at where warm waters halt as a single line. I think of the line, so why is it I must go and leave my trove, or why is it I must go and leave my trove for all to seek? Is that a single line? I can't remember now. I have to go look it up. But I think of that as a single line, right? I think we all look at those as single lines, but in poetry, those are called verses, or a verse in the poem. But when Forrest Fenn reads, and he says, I'm going to read you the first few lines, but he reads the first 2 stanzas. Well, that's, in my mind, 8 different lines, right? 2 stanzas, 4 lines each, or 4 verses, 8 lines, right? So it doesn't make any sense to me. So I think, what are those 3 things? Because few to me is 3. And I break it out as complete sentences. And those are 3. So I see that as him saying those are the first few lines in the poem. As a line in grammatical sense can be considered a sentence, but in poetic senses and poetry, a single line is considered a verse. But in prose, a line, or in the written form, prose, is a sentence. So there's 2 different ways, and I think Forrest Fenn knows the difference between a poetic verse and a prose sentence. so to speak. So I look at that and I just go, it just doesn't add up to me. And I had this whole conversation over on Mysterious Writings about the first few clues, and you guys can go find that. And there's some good discussion going back between myself, Harry Truman, Goldie, Zap, and a few others that are in there that we're talking about that. I'd love to hear your guys' comments on that, and we can chat over there if you want to. I'm going down a little bit more. Davio, hey, my brother from another mother out in Colorado now. Flip side, just shut down my live thing, dude. What is with the brother searcher? Were you live, Davio? I'm sorry, brother. I didn't see you that you were live. I was talking with Sasha and Jason, decided, you know what, the heck, I'm gonna go with live, because I was gonna actually go on AGK and talk with those guys for a little bit, but I'm sorry, brother. I didn't mean to cut you off if you were live. You guys talk amongst yourself real quick. I'm going to go use the restroom. I will be right back. Back, and yes, I did wash my hands. So what else you guys want to talk about tonight? You guys got anything else that's pressing on your guys' minds that you want to discuss? Again, my biggest thing is I've really just been going down this whole, idea about, order of the clues, and is there an order that is not as obvious as the consecutive order that we possibly view? And hey, Colorado, good to see you guys. And how are you and Sarah doing up there in Pagosa? Good to see you in here. Cheers. Brad from Colorado, Brado says, do you think in the wood could refer to the place where warm waters halt? No, I don't. Straightforward. I don't think it refers to where warm waters halt. I think it is in close proximity to that area. But here's what I'm currently thinking right now. If Forrest Fenn says, as he says in the Columbia interview, the first few clues are the first two stanzas, then I look at it as obviously the first clue. The first thing we got to figure out is a correct starting point. As he says, begin at where warm waters halt is the first clue. I don't think that that's the entirety of the first clue. Again, like Marvin told him, you should always tell the truth, but you should not always tell all of the truth. I don't think Forrest Fenn is telling us all of the truth, that the first clue is just begin at where warm waters halt. I look at it is that is not a complete statement, Brad. I look at it as, the whole first clue is begin at where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down, not far, but too far to walk. I look at that as the whole entire first clue. And if the distance from whatever we think Warm Water's halt is, further through is too far to walk, then Forrest Fenn didn't start at whatever our interpretation of what Warm Water's halt is. He started somewhere else. So I think that location is somewhere else. And I know I'm getting off the topic here, but God, where did I get off on this tangent here? I just totally lost my own train of thought here. So here's what I'm thinking. Going back to this Columbia interview, if that first few clues are those things, then we've got to know the correct starting point. And once we know what that correct starting point is, then we can proceed from there. And again, like that first couple of words from the third stanza says, from there, it's no place for the meek. What I'm thinking now is that first stanza where he says, as I have gone alone in there, maybe from the perspective of Forrest Fenn, or even us as a searcher, is standing, and this is really hard to portray, is from us standing at the point, at the exact precise point that from there represents. So all the information prior to the words from there may be giving us the correct starting point. And then from there we proceed. So he's stating, as I have gone alone in there. In there may be that location that a person would not normally go. Thank you, Cynthia Meacham, for that whole 2019 Australia interview, right? Where Forrest Fenn says, the treasure is in an isolated location. It's in a place a person would not normally go. So if that correct starting point is the physical representation of what from there represents, then it is Forrest Fenn who has gone alone in there. And we too, as a searcher or the eventual finder, must too go alone in there. So that is my whole thought process and what he's talking about these first few clues. So I think in the wood, Brad may be talking about that area, that specific area that he's gone alone into, maybe theoretically in the wood. And the wood is talking about a very specific and definitive area, whether you think that's a small copse of trees, a forest, a national forest, or whatever you want to think it is. I think that is still a clue. And why exactly he says in the Jennifer London interview that there's references to wood, when talking about the 9 clues. So I think it's still a clue. It's still information that you need that will get you closer to finding the treasure chest. It cannot be ignored. It's a noun, right? Wood is a noun. It's not you could think it's a verb and some, instances of it, but it's still potentially a noun, right? Can I go off too much of a tangent on that? Probably going to delete this video anyways. So I'm glad you guys are here listening to it, as you can. Brad, good to see you. Hope Sarah. Brad, does Sarah work in the medical field? I know we met before, but I don't know if I ever asked her. I saw the other day that she posted on Facebook that she was wearing a mask that was made by somebody. I didn't know if she worked in the medical field or not. Oh man, I hate it when my chat jumps all over. You guys are chatting so much and then I miss what was said. I gotta jump back up here, guys. Huli said something here. I want to catch what she said. Huli, at the flip side, what do you think Forrest did with the things he removed from the chest, or why he told us they were in there initially? A couple of things I know off the top of my mind, Huli, that he removed, and Douglas Preston told this, and we have to believe that he's telling us the truth. He removed the money, right? The physical paper money, and I think he also moved the watches, right? I think he moved the repeater watches or the timers or something in there. What do you think I did with those things he removed? I don't know. I don't know what he did with those things. Those were hard things for him to come by, right? Those $500 notes, those $1,000 notes. I don't know what he did with those. He possibly did something with those. I think that's an interesting question, Huli. I don't have an answer for you on those things. Maybe that's part of these things that he wants to give the finder if they return the bracelet to him. I don't know. It's possible. Cheers, guys. Interesting question, Huli. I'd love to discuss that off side with you on the Facebook page or one of the forums. That's interesting. I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about that. Denise, you just need to email me. I've given you my email, I don't know how many times. If you want me to send you the link to that video, I've taken it down because it's a very, golly, guys. Listen, it was 2016 when, and I told you guys that the whole evolution of a poem purist, there was something very important that I think Forrest Fenn said to Phil Bayman and Steve about, you know, that they could not find the correct starting point with just the word somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe and beginning where warm waters halt, that they need to look at the bigger picture. They were missing certain ingredients in the poem. And then you combine that with all the information we need to find the treasure is in the poem, that nobody has any secret information to the treasure's location. It's all in the poem for all to see. That made me really believe that, you know, that all the information I needed to find the treasure was in the poem, and really led me into being what I deem as a poem purist. That having the belief and faith that everything I needed was in the poem, right? So you've got to go back and you've got to email me, Denise, if you want that information, because what Forrest Fenn told Cynthia in 2014, I think, was very, very key. And that was the fact that she needed to understand the difference between the and a. There's a very distinct difference between the definitive and indefinite article of grammar. It's very important. I think Forrest Fenn was alluding to something very important to Cynthia. Now, you can call that a hint, you can call that a clue, you can call it whatever you, super secret squirrel hints given to us, or you can call it whatever you want. But this was information that I figured out on my own, and then and it hasn't led me to the treasure yet, obviously, but then I find out that 2 years earlier, this stuff was just given to a searcher in private, and then it comes out, and it was like, wow. To me, it was a not a confirmation, but a confidence builder that I was on the right track. But I was disappointed that I felt that this information was given so loosely to another searcher, you know, that may not understand the significance of that information. And it may not be significant at all. To me, it's significant. But again, like all of you in the chat room, I don't have the treasure yet. So I can't prove that it is. If we ever do find the treasure, I may never say that that was significant, because I wouldn't. I like Cynthia, I like Forrest, I like them both. I wouldn't want to beat them over the head with it, but it's unfortunate to me that I think that kind of information was so openly given to a searcher that has never been, you know, openly said to the public. Why hasn't Forrest Fenn come out to the public and say, hey guys, you all need to know the difference between the word the and a. It's important. It is important. It is one of the cornerstones and foundations of understanding nouns and the significance of specific nouns in our language. It's very important. And if the poem is based in grammatical rules and structure, which a lot of people don't believe it is, that's fine, then that is very important to me. So I'm gonna stop beating that up. K-Pro, you know this about YouTube. I should not have to educate you. And if you want to ask me a question, put at the flip side. Otherwise, I'll miss it. I just happened to see it in there. Was this flip? IG asked about the backpack he carried the items in during the second trip, and then he said he couldn't remember what he did with it. I thought a clever question that Finn said he forgot was interesting. Yeah, I think he did say, and Christy, I cannot definitively point to any quote where he said anything about the treasure. I know he said that at one point, you know, he carried the treasure contents in first, and then he carried the chest in second, which to me would have been the smartest thing to do. Because if the location where he was going to hide the treasure was isolated, it's a place that people wouldn't normally go, then I think he would feel more secure in taking $500,000 worth of gold, 20.2 troy ounces of gold, into a location that he was pretty certain that was isolated from where people wouldn't normally go, that he would take that in there first. At least that's what I would do. And then I would go back and get a $25,000 plus, you know, bronze chest, and then bring it in second. I would feel more secure about losing that in my car if somebody broke into it than 20.2 troy ounces of gold and numismatic value that could be $500,000 or more sitting in my car. But I think he also said something about that he part of it he carried in his hands and part of it he carried in a backpack or whatever. Well, if the bracelet is part of the treasure, then of course he carried it on his wrist or in his hands, and maybe he carried a nugget in his hands or whatever else. It doesn't matter. But what he did with the backpack, I don't know if that's important. Maybe it is. It's an interesting thought process. I think you should create a thread on it, talk about it. I think it's interesting. Sure, we can talk about that. Christy, put in there at the flip side. You know this. Michael, how are you doing? Wildcatter's daughter, how are you? Paul Wood, good to see you. And your sled, Nick. Haven't talked to you in a while. Good to see you. Crap, I'm out of beer. Somebody give me a beer. Bring it to me. What are you guys talking about? The chat is always interesting. Davio22, do you have a key word? Sure. I think that there is, Davio. I think there is one word in the poem that does, or that is more important than any other word in that poem. I'm not necessarily going to say that. I think that a lot of us believe we know what that word is, and I think it should be pretty obvious to everybody in there, but maybe not to some. But I think what as Forrest Fenn said, you know, that there are a few in tight focus with the word that is key. But I think what's important in there is that Forrest Fenn had said, and I'm going to completely paraphrase because I can't get this by heart, even though K-Bro thinks I know everything by heart, that, you know, there are many searchers that are, golly, I got to get this right. I'm going to get this right, guys. I don't want to mess it up because this is important to me. Let me pull up Terry Scant. I got to pull this up. I'm doing a keyword search under key because I don't know this really off the top of my head. And Forrest Fenn says, it is interesting to know that a great number of people are out there searching. Many are giving serious thoughts to the clues in my poem, but only a few are in tight focus with a word that is key. The treasure may be discovered sooner than I anticipated. What I like about this, Davio, is that he said, many are giving serious thought to the clues in my poem. Now he's talking about the clues in the poem that he says that many are giving serious thought to the clues in his poem, but only a few are in tight focus with the word that is key. This is where I'm in the minority of interpreting this whole response from Forrest. Many interpret this response from Forrest to say that many searchers are in tight focus with a word that is key. But I look at this and I say that there's only a few clues in the poem that are in tight focus with the word that is key. And it's just a difference. It's just a little bit of semantics. I'm not saying I'm right and they're wrong. It's just the quote unquote flip side of this. And the fact that Forrest Fenn says in this quote that the treasure may be discovered sooner than anticipated, may be based on the fact that many are giving serious thought to just the clues in his poem and not everything outside of it. It kind of goes back to that him telling us to get back in the box is the fact that many people are giving serious thought to just the clues in the poem, why he thinks the treasure is going to be found sooner. But then we got so far outside the box, we started running down these rabbit holes of Holden Caulfield and Robert Redford and for whom the bell tolls and everything outside, trying to locate where his plane was shot down in Vietnam, which is cool, by the way, but it has no bearing on our ability to find the treasure. I think it's so much more going back to the poem and trying to simplify this whole thing. Again, it's just my bias as a poem purist that, you know, just 166 words will lead us to the poem. And it hasn't led me to the treasure yet. It hasn't led me to the treasure, obviously, so I could be completely wrong. I'm just giving you guys, quote unquote, the flip side of this whole thing. Davio, what do you say again? Yeah, it's a word. It's a single word. It's not, you know, a multitude of words. It's a single word in the poem. Sure, absolutely. Tight like a rope. Okay. Heinrich Himmler, how are you? Heinrich says, what is there to say someone else hasn't found it? Sure. There's no, okay, this is something, Heinrich and Capro, I see your question too. Heinrich, this is something I've talked about too. Forrest Fenn cannot definitively know that the treasure chest has not been found. And I'm a firm believer in that. And people can call me crazy if you want, and a lot of people do. There absolutely could be somebody that has found the treasure chest, and for whatever reason, Heinrich, they don't want to say anything about it. Whether it's they want to protect their identity, they're just have enough money, they don't want to worry about it. They have such an affinity and cult-like love for Forrest Fenn that they don't want this thing to end. Absolutely. There's no definitive proof that Forrest Fenn knows that the treasure chest has not been found. There's absolutely no way. If Forrest Fenn has said he has not gone back to the treasure's location since he hid it, he cannot know. Even by looking at Google Earth, he cannot zoom down close enough or far enough to see if the treasure chest is there. He's even said Google Earth does not go down far enough. He said that, so he does not definitively know. I think that the definitive mechanism for him knowing the treasure chest has been found is somehow closely tied to whatever information is within that autobiography. It's just my thought. It's just a theory that it's kind of like, you know, the Edgar Allan Poe short story called The Purloined Letter. That whatever information was contained within that purloined letter, if it was released, then that person that had the purloined letter, they would be known. And I think if you go back and you read that story, the key phrase in that story is that the ascendancy of that person who had the letter that released that information would be dependent upon the robber's knowledge of the loser's knowledge of the robber. What that means is that whoever the finder is, that Forrest Fenn would know that finder based on the release of that information that is within that autobiography. That whatever that information that may be in there would be so, I don't know, I hate to say, it's not like this D.B. Cooper kind of crap that people want to talk about, but if it was information that was not known to anybody but Forrest Fenn and the finder, if that information was released, then Forrest Fenn would know without a doubt that, oh, the treasure chest has been found, because nobody else knew that information. You know, it's like we've never seen a picture of the olive jar, right? That may be one of the things that we've never seen pictures of. We've seen the frog. We know what the coins look like. We know all the nuggets look like. A couple of the other things in there, but nobody's ever seen the olive jar that was waved in front of Forrest Fenn's face by John Charles whatever, right? But if that picture of that olive jar was released, or the information within that olive jar was released, then Forrest Fenn would know without a doubt that the treasure chest has been found, because I've never shown that information. It's that same, I mean, where the fuck is Sean Martinez? Like, seriously, he's a homicide detective, and there's plenty of, maybe a couple of you guys in the chat room that are homicide detectives. But you don't, there's certain information that a homicide detective would not release about evidence of a case. Why? Because if that evidence had come forward, that they would know that that person that knew that evidence would be a person that was partaking in that crime, right? So that's how I think that whole mechanism for knowing for Forrest Fenn comes into play. Oh my God, and I got on a whole tangent there. Oh my God. Who asked that question that I got released on that? I don't know who said that, but damn you. K-Pro, he said, he has sold original illustrations from the 3 books and many other items related to the chase. I would think that this item of the backpack would also be sold by Fenn, let alone a hint. I don't care about the backpack that he hid it in. I want the backpack that it was brought home in. Right? I mean, I don't know. Like, was it a backpack, or did he carry it open in his arms? Again, what did he say, K-Pro, in your interview with him? That there was certain things that had to happen, 6 or 8 things that had to happen in order for this to take place. And he felt lucky that no one was around when he went to hide the treasure chest, right? So if he felt lucky that no one was around, he had to be prepared that people would be around. So I agree in some sense that he had to have some kind of cover story or some way to disguise himself in hiding the treasure chest. He couldn't just walk out there with, walking out here with all this gold in my arms, if it was me, I'm going to follow this old guy and I'm going to see what he's going with this shit, right? But he felt lucky that no one was around. So yeah, he probably had to hide it in some kind of backpack, or I like to think he was probably dressed up like he normally would do in any other time he's going out fishing, right? A fisherman's not unlikely they would carry a backpack with them with their tackle box or anything else with them, that he would carry that in, right? It's just the way I think and how he would do it. I don't know if the backpack, sure, maybe after the fact, after this whole thing comes out, Forrest Fenn could autograph his backpack and say, this is what I carried the treasure chest in, and get $1 million and give it to Zoe or Kelly or somebody. Sure. I mean, he can do whatever he wants, right? With that. I don't, that's after the fact. It doesn't matter now. It won't matter if Forrest Fenn is dead when this thing is found. It won't matter at all. Otherwise he would have already came out and sold that, or, gave it to somebody to put on an eBay auction or something, right? How far are we into this thing? Like a little over an hour. Hey, Corvette Ronnie, how are you? Good to see you. ES, nice to see you too. EA. What are we talking about? Lucy Harrelson? That's a new name I've never seen. What else you guys want to talk about? I think we're all caught up with all the questions, unless I missed something in here. Carrie Galloway, how are you? Marty Bird, my favorite Ozark character. Jack, please send me the winning backpack. I need some money to pay off my chicken coop I've been building. So yeah, this whole COVID thing, I've been in the process of building a chicken coop that we're building for our backyard, and my wife just bought a trampoline for the kids. So tomorrow morning, I got to put a trampoline together and finish roofing our chicken coop tomorrow. That's going to be fun. We bought this, you guys can look this up, but it's by Omelet. It's a automatic sliding door for the chicken coop that covers up the hen, the hen house. So that's pretty cool. And then we got the best egg box, which we researched and figured out what's the best kind of box for the hen laying. We did a lot of research on this thing. Trust me, it was a lot of work trying to figure all this stuff out. But me and my brother put this thing together. It's been pretty cool. Had a lot of fun with it. K-Pro says, we're all thinking about the one thing we're all missing. Just maybe this might have something to do with it. Maybe not. Yeah, I mean, we don't know, Christy. We don't know what we're all missing. But I think, Christy, what did Forrest Fenn say in your interview with him? You asked him that question, what is the one thing that we're all missing? And there was some, I can't remember exactly, but he said something, it's important to the story. And I think that's what I took away from it. The one thing that we're all missing is important to the story. And I think that story is about, not just about the finding of the treasure, or excuse me, not just about the hiding of the treasure, but the finding of the story. I mean, this story has not yet been completely written. We have the book, we have his autobiography, we have the memoir, but what we don't have yet, Chris, is we don't have the end. We have the epilogue, but we don't necessarily have the end. It's just an asterisk in a story that has not yet been written, right? So we don't have the end of this story yet. And I think the end of that story is the finder's story. You have the hider, and then you have the finder. And I think that while this is part of the story, it's not important part of the story for us to find it. And maybe that's hard for me to really put into words, but I think that whoever this finder is part of this story, but it's not the important part in order for us to find the treasure. I think it's all important for all of us, other 349,999 searchers that don't find this. That's the important part of the story that we all want to know. Because again, what is the question we're all going to want to know when this thing is found? We're going to know, one, where was it? What was the correct solve? And who found it? Those are the three things, in probably that order. We all just want to know where the fuck this thing was, so that we can reverse engineer it and go, oh, see, I was right. I knew what Warm Waters Hall was, or I knew what the home of Brown was. That's what's all important to us non-finders. But what's important to the story, the complete story, the movie, everything else that has not yet been written, is the finder story and who that person is, who he or she was. And I think that's the rest of the story, to quote, no, I can't remember the name. Anyway, yeah, the rest of the story, I think that's an important part of the rest of the story, K-Pro. And I think, Forrest Fenn kind of alluded that in your interview with him. That's 3D Bonds. Dan, how are you? I think Fenn could have done something with the savings bonds in a complex way that when the finder dang it, y'all are responding at the same time, cashes them, he could see that they only are aligned by certain. Yeah, I mean, sure, that could be a way. Is there some kind of it's kind of like the IOU 3D that he said that he took out of the treasure chest because he thought his bank wouldn't be around then, but wouldn't the Federal Reserves potentially be around in 100 or 1,000 years from now? We hope they would be. So there could be something like that in the autobiography that's sealed in that olive jar. Sure, there could be something like that. But if he's dead and gone, and we hope he's not when this thing is found, we hope it's found in our lifetime, in his lifetime, right? But if it's not, he wouldn't know, theoretically. Not know. I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting thought process to go down, Dan, but I don't know if it really gets us close to finding the treasure chest. But it's obviously if we're not going to find it, the other 99.9% of us are not going to find it. It's fun to talk about those things. Heinrich says, at the flip side, I believe you're quite a smart person. No, there's a lot of people that wouldn't agree with you. Wildcatter's daughter, flip side, what if finder doesn't tell? Exactly. I mean, I think that there's Wildcatter's daughter. I think there's quite a few of us searchers out there that if we were to be the ones that find it, we wouldn't tell. But I think there's a caveat to that, Wildcatter's daughter, that I think that we do owe the search community an ethical responsibility to provide some kind of irrefutable proof that the treasure has been found. And the reason why I say that is that if it was me personally and I found the treasure and I didn't tell anybody about it, and somebody lost their lives, you know, like Mr. Sexton did just here a few months ago, lost their lives, I would feel ethically and personally responsible for that person's loss of life, and for their children, for their grandchildren, for their husbands or wives, whatever. I wouldn't feel good about that about myself. So I think that we do owe some kind of ethical responsibility to the search community as a finder to provide some irrefutable proof. That doesn't mean that, Wildcatter's daughter, that you have to come out and tell the world who you are. You know, I think that there are ways that you can provide proof to the search community, whether that be just by going to visit Forrest and give him his bracelet, or, you know, just mail it to him. Here it is, and he would know. You know, I think that we do owe that to the search community. You may disagree with me, and who are we to question the eventual finder on their motives? That's their way of doing it. I just know if it was me, and I think a lot of you in the search community would probably agree, that we do owe some kind of responsibility to the search community to provide some kind of irrefutable proof that it's been found. But that doesn't mean you still can't enjoy the thrill of the chase. You still can enjoy trying to match wits with the man and the finder of trying to find this location. And hopefully there's something there at that location that, if it is found, that will provide you that closure and that proof that you did find the location, that you matched wits with not only Forrest, but the finder. That's my thought. Maybe that's kind of whimsical in some people's ideas, but that's my thought. But sure, there's a possibility the finder may never reveal themselves. Crap, it jumped back up again, guys. Let me see if I can find where I was. Going back up. Some of you guys know how this is. K-Pro says, like Michael said, we can't know how to find it, as Fenn thinks the poem summarizing, since it has been solved, so maybe there are other ways to figure this out. The one thing, K-Pro, I cannot understand what you're trying to say there. Michael, you'd have to tell me exactly what you're thinking there. Find it. I can't understand what you're trying to say there. Michael or Henrik Himmler says, well, let's team up and look for it. I already have a search partner. Sorry, buddy. 3D Bonds. Dan, who's Dan? Copper Dan? Okay, 3D Bonds, Copper Dan, two different plate people. Then I've got you confused. I apologize. Davio22, flip side, is the search complicated or simple? Yeah, Forrest Fenn says to simplify, right? He says to simplify things. And are we overcomplicating it? I don't know, Davio. It's that's the whole thing, right? Are we overcomplicating it, or are we oversimplifying? Is there a medium in between of it? If this is supposed to be, you know, something a redneck with 12 kids should be able to figure out, then where is that, you know, happy medium between overcomplication and oversimplification, right? I think it's got to lie in there somewhere. And I like to think I know where that is, Davio, but I don't have the treasure, so I can't know for certain. And that's the whole mystery in this thing, is it not? That's what makes this thing so fun. I think that and why we have so much conjecture. Again, conjecture is just thoughts and ideas based on incomplete information. We don't have, we're supposed to have everything we know, but we're trying to interpret it from the architect's mind, so to speak. So again, you know, there's people that are on the spectrum of what a normal person would call crazy, and there's people on the spectrum that think they're pragmatic, that the crazy people would say that they're crazy. You know, I mean, where does that lie? Is it in the middle of it all? I think so. Somewhere in there. It's between that knowledge and imagination, for sure. And when this whole thing is found, are we really going to sit back and say, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? Or are we going to sit back and go, that was fucking crazy? I mean, I don't know, Davio. Where is it? Sassafras, CMT, at the flip side, but imagine it already has been found. The finder would never come out now since they would be blamed for all those deaths. Sassafras, good, interesting point. And I've given Forrest Fenn, some flack about what I think you're alluding to here. And this goes back to, Randy Bilyeu being lost. And I've called Forrest Fenn out on this, and I know he hasn't taken it lightly based on personal communications between the two of us. But when you go back to December 2015, when Forrest Fenn said, if you knew exactly where the treasure chest was, you could probably retrieve it in any weather. And then Forrest Fenn never coming out and stating that Bandelier National Park was not within the search area, because actually just prior to that, Forrest Fenn had said, because Bandelier National Park is on the Too Far to Walk map, it should be considered, or somewhere along that lines. Now I've got to be thinking in the mind of someone like Randy Bilyeu that was thinking about those things and felt that he really was confident in his solve that it was in Bandelier National Park. And he found a way in January of 2016 to try and to go up there to find the treasure. Now, is Forrest Fenn responsible for not ruling that area out, or telling somebody that don't go in winter before then? I think if it was me and I was the architect of this poem, I think I would feel a little bit of burden of that. But I'm not Forrest Fenn. And again, I've said some things to him in personal emails that I think that he understands my thought process on this. But Randy is his own person. He had to make his own decisions, and you have to take personal accountability for your own actions. And Forrest Fenn is not responsible for each and every one of our actions. So I don't think that the finder, Sassafras, can be held responsible morally or ethically for actions that are taken after the find. But I think in my personal ethics and beliefs, Sassafras, that I would do whatever I could to provide you, each and every one of you in the search community, some kind of irrefutable proof that the treasure has been found, openly to the search community. I'm not saying I would send Forrest Fenn that. I would find a way to openly put it out there to the search community that this is it, and then allow Forrest Fenn to, if he was still around, to provide that proof. That's completely different if Forrest Fenn is no longer with us and Forrest Fenn is still with us. I think that, and I've thought this through a lot. How do you provide that different type of proof? You have to provide a somewhat proof that Forrest Fenn could not deny it and then say, yes, it's been found, if he's still alive. If he's gone, then it's a different type of proof that you have to provide the search community, so that they all go, and I'm talking about those people that are in the know of this chase, who would be able to say, look, guys, this fucking thing has been found. There's no doubt about it. We know Forrest is gone, but this is definitive proof that it has been found. I think there are ways of doing that. I may be completely wrong, but I think there are ways of doing that. Sassafras, I hope I'm answering your question, but yeah. Yeah, I think Wildcatters, I think there's a lot of people that still want to have the thrill of the chase, that while there's proof that the treasure's been found, why do you want to, what's the reward in you, the finder, telling everybody the correct solve? Unless your whole motive is money, and your 15 minutes of fame. I think that there's a lot of people, as Forrest Fenn has said, there's many searchers in this community that are not blinded by the value of the treasure and their 15 minutes of fame. If you really want to make money off this, there's plenty of other ways to make money off this by not revealing the location. And I think you just have to be creative in that. Have I figured that out? Not wholly completely, but I think there are other ways if you're really wanting to make money on this. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that why give your 15 minutes of fame and make your $2 million and take the thrill away from everybody else? I think there's other ways around this. And I haven't figured that completely out yet, but I'm definitely working on it. Jack, the proof is in the chest, not the location. Sure, absolutely. K-Pro, who do you think will give confirmation of the treasure chest being found after Fenn passes? The finder. Nobody else. Nobody else. Okay, well, there's people like Douglas Preston. There's people that have seen the contents of the treasure chest, though those certain items that Forrest Fenn has talked about openly, that would be able to say, oh yeah, that's the one nugget, or whatever else. I think there's some things in there that a person like Douglas Preston or Michael McGarity or a few other people will be able to say, sure, that's it. But there's certain things in that chest that even Michael McGarity or Shiloh or even Kelly or Zoe or Peggy have never seen. That only Forrest knows, that would only be applicable if he's still alive. Okay, bro. Marty Bird, have you read Catcher in the Rye? What do you make of the supposed? I've never read Catcher in the Rye. I don't intend to read Catcher in the Rye. I don't feel I have a need to read that. So Marty, I haven't read it. I don't see the similarities. Metric Fox, at the flip side, what would you do if you found it? Again, Metric Fox, I would find a way to provide irrefutable proof to the search community openly that the treasure has been found. But again, that proof is completely different whether Mr. Fenn is alive or he has passed. It's completely different. Currently now, my thought is how to provide that why he's still with us now. That will change if he passes. Jack, prediction, the finder will not divulge the location, no book about it, otherwise the spot will turn into yeah, I agree, Jack. I agree with you in that. I don't think the location should be revealed. I think that should be part of the mystery. I think that while the finder could reveal themselves publicly, I think that giving away that location, then the whole thrill is gone. Because that's just what everybody wants to know. What is he in that whole Jennifer London interview when Jennifer asked, well, you could just tell me where it is. What does Forrest Fenn say? He says, well, then why would I tell you that? Then the thrill is gone. There's no more mystery. There's no more excitement. There's no more intrigue. There's no more adventure. Why would you want to know that? So I agree, Jack. I hope that that's what happens. I would still love this thrill, and it's fun. But there's got to be something there at the final location that the follow-on finders of that particular spot would be able to know that they did solve it. But again, you've got to trust in the fact that those people that come behind you would not reveal that location either. And that's the whole kind of catch-22 to this whole thing. Wildcatter's daughter at the flip side. Sorry, not my point. I meant a finder might not share, not that I would. Okay, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I just I'm pretty dead set on that the eventual location may not need to be shared, or the solve. That just takes everything away. If you want to make money off it, and that's what your 15 minutes of fame are, then go out and do it. I just don't see it that way personally. I think that there's more to the whole story than that. Anyway, guys, what are we going on, an hour and a half here? So I kind of want to wrap this thing up again, guys. I wasn't planning on having a big topic for this evening. Just wanted to chat with you guys, say hi, just have a good time, and hope you all are doing well in your stay-at-home order or whatever you guys are doing out there. I really appreciate all the other Fenn tubers that are out there putting out great content, talking about the chase. Like to give a lot of props to the House Husband Diaries, to Treasures Galore, to K-Pro and Cow, to AGK, to everybody else out there that's putting good content and chatting about the chase out there. I love a lot of you guys that are coming out there. Want to see more of you guys coming out. I just like taking a little bit more of a backseat now. I've got a lot more family stuff that's more important to me and enjoying, but like to jump out here once in a while and say hi to you guys and just chat with you guys a little bit. Hope you guys are having doing the best that you can with everything that you're doing now. Take care of some projects at home, spend some time with family, read some good books, watch some good shows. I did watch Tiger King. Wild stuff, guys. But just fun. I hope you all are doing well, and I hope to catch you all on the flip side. Have a good night, guys. We'll see you all on the forums. Take care. Good night.